Greetings and welcome to the Native Business Podcast. This is episode 11. My name is Gary Davis.
And my name is Carmen Davis.
And we just want to say thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to tune into another episode. We have an amazing guest today.
Yes.
But first, we would be remiss if we didn't, of course, remind you of all the great things that are going on at Native Business Mag, our website. Great information, news from across Indian country, all through a business lens. If it doesn't have to do with business, we're not writing about it. We're not covering about anything that's going on with it. So,
absolutely. And you can find all of that at www.nativebusinessmag.com for the latest and greatest in business in Indian country.
The voice of business in Indian country. And of course, again, I'm getting used to this word, socials. I don't know if it just, the vibe of it is different, but our social media.
Social media, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Right?
So we're on, from what I hear, we're on Twitter.
We're on Twitter, Native Biz Mag.
At Native Biz Mag.
And then Instagram and Facebook, Native Business Magazine. You can also find us at YouTube if you search Native Business Magazine.
Right, because we're still working our way up to
we're
getting
campaigning
an official,
for our own URL.
Right, which is all based on subscriptions. And I just want to say thank you because we have been seeing the subscriptions go up. So thank you. We appreciate it very much, and we thank you for all your support. And of course, the Native business vision and mission wouldn't be complete unless it included the voices from across Indian country that have to do with business, those entrepreneurs, the great folks that are out there doing things, the conversations from tribal leadership that are boots on the ground, making it happen every day across Indian country, and of course, all of the people that we want to remember to always support those Native businesses.
Absolutely,
it truly does take a community, and we're very, very privileged today to have a guest on the Native Business Podcast. Who is an accomplished individual in many different ways. And we don't want to waste any more time getting into that because we want to make the most use of our time.
Yes.
And today we have joining us Mr. Jamie Fullmer. So good morning and greetings, Jamie.
Good morning. It's great to be on with you this morning and your beautiful country up in Washington State.
Yeah. So here we are on the phone, and we thought we'd be talking to you in Arizona, where it's probably a little warmer. It's going to be up in the 80s today here, but probably not near 800 like it may be down in Phoenix. Yeah. But as it turns out, you are in the beautiful Pacific Northwest today, so welcome to this part of the country. And of course, if we would have maybe known that, we could have found a place for us to sit down and actually do this in person. But you know what? Thank God for technology.
Yes.
And so, before we get too far into the conversation, I always find it best to have the folks that, we're interviewing or we're having join us on the podcast to tell about themselves in their own words, because who knows it better than you? Just as much of a range of who Jamie Fullmer is, some of the things that you've accomplished in the past and where you come from, and let the good folks know about you.
Thank you very much, Gary and Carmen. I'm honored to be on your show and podcast this morning. As was mentioned, my name is Jamie Fullmer. I'm Apache, proud to be a proud member of the Yavapai-Apache Nation located in Camp Verde, Arizona, right in the center of Arizona and of the universe for us. And so we call ourselves at home Dilje. The Hunters is the name of our people in Apache. And we have a beautiful landscape. And just as an historical on myself, I was honored to serve my tribe as the chairman for 2 terms in office. We had term limits in our constitution. And so once those terms were over, I founded a company called Bluestone Strategy Group. And for the last 13 years now, we've been working exclusively in Indian country with tribal entities and enterprises, and also the intertribal organizations around the United States. We've been honored to serve over 180 tribes over the last 13 years in numerous ways, but the core of our work is in economic development and helping tribes to create their vision and direction for how they'd like to see their business opportunities go and grow, as well as the governance of the tribe, working with tribal leadership and tribal communities to update and really look towards strengthening their governments and how they do business and provide services to the community and to their membership. And so just really proud and honored. I just, by way of background, I have a master's degree in social work and community development from the University of Utah, and I have a business administration degree from Southern Utah University as well. So I think those backgrounds really provided a great opportunity for me to really develop a vision and direction for my tribe while I was chairman. And prior to being the chairman, I was also the Health and Human Services Director for my nation. And so really proud and honored to be, as you said, boots on the ground. And with Bluestone, we still do boots on the ground because we work with leadership to develop their priorities and help them to implement, in many cases, to really create an efficient, effective systems of governing their businesses as well as their tribal government.
And I think that's where I actually met you for the first time, was during your tenure as chairman. And shout out to, I think, Lemomi from your community who helped bring us there. And you know, sometimes I have these memory surges, and I think that was just one of them, where you can remember back.
I remember, Gary, you said, when I say Yava, you say pie.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it was a great, you know, multiple times that we had the privilege of being in the community, and you know, such gracious.
We love you out there. Our people really loved you, and you were performing and doing that part of your life, and just was grateful to have you come out and really inspire our young people with your music and your energy. And so really did enjoy Lightfoot and all of that.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, it was a huge privilege and an honor for me to be there and for us to be there. And, you know, talking about that time, what are some of the biggest takeaways that you yielded from your time as chairman? What are some of the things that resonated with you and that you identified as part of that clear vision you speak about that guides leadership and development? What are some of the main takeaways that you could share with folks during your time as chairman?
Well, great. I appreciate you bringing that up. You know, as a chairman, it's an honor for sure to serve your people, but it's also a challenge in that you can never please everybody. And I think anybody who's ever been in any kind of leadership position recognizes that. The important piece, I think, for me that I took away that was most important is that you really do have to develop a team effort, because not only do you have to have the community on board and supporting your initiatives and those things that you're trying to achieve on their behalf, you really have in a tribal system, you have a council and you have other leaders that have priorities that they want to get addressed and that they've committed to for their constituents and members. And so you really do have to find the effort to work together. And I've seen, not only from my time as chairman, but as in our work with Bluestone, that unified vision and that commitment to work together is really the cornerstone of supporting growth in a positive way. Doesn't mean that there aren't hiccups and challenges. It just means that if everyone's aligned with a purpose and a perspective that they support, then you can not only move it forward, but you can also communicate it to your members, and communication is a critical path. And I knew that from the outset. But you know, in my 2 terms in office, it really became very important to communicate to our community, because as we all know, with those of us that live in Indian country, that there's quite a bit of rumors that go around any kind of decisions that's made, and so it's important to quiet those and really be open and have an open dialogue and be transparent about what's being done on behalf of the community. I think the challenge that I learned really is that, you know, it's an honor to serve your people, but again, you know, there is a lot of critics in the work. And so nothing that you do or that I felt like I did is really completely satisfying to the members. And so that sometimes is a challenge to the ego. And I got over that really quickly because it goes on quite a bit. And so, but that I think is are critical. And most importantly is you've got to remember that you're trying to you're just one piece of the puzzle in building the nation and continuing to build your tribal community. And you know, you provide the best that you can for the time that you're given, and realize and recognize that you're handing it off to someone else, and they're going to do their part and what they see is right. And so recognizing that you are just a piece of an ongoing commitment to preserving our culture and our identity as Indian people, and in my case, our culture as Yavapai and Apache people, and really trying to protect and respect what's been taken away, but also what's still ingrained in our tribal mind, and those are really valuable lessons to take away. I think it's really helped me with building Bluestone Strategy Group and the work that we do and supporting and advising tribes around the country and helping them to build and build capacity for their own future. And I think finally in closing is that we have all of us as natives that have, are involved in our communities. We have such a rich culture, all of us, that has been really torn, in many places because of the growth of the United States and everything that's gone on in our histories, our shared histories as people. But, we've really got to take the time now, because we have the tools, technology, as you brought up earlier, is a great tool for us to preserve language and preserve some of the important cultural aspects of who we are, so that the modern generations can embrace it. And it's something that we need to embrace ourselves, because technology is a great equalizer for us as Indian people. I see that and know that because it brings us on a level playing field with knowledge and wisdom and just insight around the world, and even in the most remote reservation community. So I did learn and see that as a tool when I was chairman as well, and that was an important facet that I helped to kind of initiate and bring forth and bring forward within our organization, the institutional government. So just an amazing time in my life to be able to serve my people. And I was relatively young. I think I was 30 or 31 when I was elected. So it was, I had a lot of energy, which was good, because it's really a 24/7 job. And all tribal leaders that are out there, I raise my hands to you, because it is a commitment to your people. You're really giving your life for them in a positive way and in a deeply respected way. But it's definitely a commitment. So, an inspiration to me, and definitely, being able to see so many strong tribal people throughout my tenure in Indian country over the last 20 years, and just really proud of what we've accomplished as people and tribal governments and expressing sovereignty. Those are all just such valuable, necessary pieces of who we are, and our tribal culture fabric is really tied to all of those pieces. And so I'm just grateful to be part of it.
Absolutely.
Grateful to have been able to serve my people.
You bring up something that, I think folks, we talk about it amongst ourselves, but we really don't talk about it a lot out in public, because I think that we always are trying to be so positive, and we're always trying to keep that, good mindset to move forward. But, truly indeed, it I'm sure feels like sometimes no good deed goes unpunished, and it comes to the forefront, especially when you assume a leadership position and you separate yourself from, the rest of the folks, and that way you become an easier target. And it's really hard, as you mentioned, to please everyone. I heard somebody the other day say that, we never hear those negative things from people that are doing more than us. It seems like we're hearing those negative things from people who are aspiring to do what you're doing, or who haven't quite reached that level yet. And it's a truth, and it resonates to hear folks like yourself and other folks that we've talked to speak to that shared experience, because it really grows you as a human being. It makes you realize that there is literally nothing that you're ever going to endeavor to do that isn't going to be faced with challenges from people not believing in it, from people looking at the negative more than the positive. And so we really try to be a breath of fresh air in that regard. And one of the things that we've tried to do with Native Business is to lift up and shine a light on our entrepreneurs across Indian country, because truly indeed, sometimes I feel that those good folks out there feel sort of alone on an island. We talk about economic development a lot in Indian country, but it's those individual business people that number in the thousands and thousands and thousands that we really haven't done. Probably we're working on always trying to do a better job of bringing those folks together, and bringing that conversation together. But congratulations to you as an entrepreneur for being named to the 2019 Native Business Top 50 Native Entrepreneurs. And you've alluded to it a little bit, but what really began your entrepreneurial journey? I know after your terms as chairman, that's when it all began. But what were those things that you could share with folks that really kind of, were tingling in you to take that leap of faith and go out there and begin what you've now done for 13 years with Bluestone Strategy?
Thank you for asking. And it's an honor to be named, in the 50 class of 50 entrepreneurs as well. And really grateful for the acknowledgement. It inspires me to keep doing good things, and I'm grateful for you lifting the entrepreneurs out there. I think my entrepreneurial spirit really came from when I was a child. My father was an entrepreneur, and he had several businesses that he ran a garage, and then he had several different businesses, because he really wanted to, after he got out of the Navy and retired from the Navy, he wanted to be his own boss. And so I got to see that in living action every day in my life. And so I think I started my first business selling night crawlers to fishermen when I was, I believe, 8 or 9 years old. And I actually did quite well with it, because I would go out every night and hunt worms, as they say. And there were quite a few, I contracted with several gas stations, and they bought multiple dozens at a time. And so I felt like I was rich when I was young. I didn't realize that we weren't, but that was the start. But I think as far as an adult, the spirit really came after I had finished my term in office. I thought, what am I going to do? And I had gotten, many offers to different large companies to work for them as, probably a representative to develop business or sales kinds of things, or even executive roles working, in their Indian country space, I guess. And I didn't feel as though, after having been the chief executive or the chairman of my tribe for those number of years, I didn't feel like I was ready to go and work for somebody. And so I had an inspiration while I was chairman. I thought, after I had met many different tribal leaders around the country, and in that tenure, I recognized that all tribes were dealing with the same challenges as mine. And originally when I got into office, I thought my tribe was the only one dealing with those challenges, because I hadn't had that experience of meeting other tribal leaders. And so when I realized that, I recognized there's some gaps in it. And we would hire consultants at my tribe, and I felt like a lot of the times they were trying to treat our government like a business, like a corporation, and they were trying to fit us into a mold that they knew. And in a lot of cases, sometimes our leaders felt disrespected from that. And I remember that experience. I thought, at that time, we didn't have maybe one or two consultants that came to us that were actually tribal. They were mostly non-Indian. And that's neither here nor there, but I felt like the experience that we received from them they weren't treating us with the ideal of being a sovereign as much as they were trying to create business opportunity. And so when I got out of office, again, not knowing what direction I wanted to go, I really thought that it would be, if I was going to place a bet on somebody, I better be willing to bet on myself. And so I went and I found a partner that had been in the consulting business. He's our president for Bluestone Strategy Group, Mr. John Moores. And I knew that what I wanted to achieve with the vision, but I didn't have the consulting experience. And so we married those two. He had 20 years of consulting experience working with mid-sized corporations, and they're about the same dollar amount of wealth as most tribal systems are. And so we felt like by bringing the best practices of consulting and organizational efficiencies and organizational systems refinement with a cultural perspective and recognizing and respecting sovereignty and the role of a tribal government, that we would really be bringing the best in breed to Indian country. So we put that vision together after I had finished my second term in office, and turned out we had spent several months meeting to decide whether or not there was a real opportunity for both of us. And we did think that there was a great opportunity, because there's so few dedicated advisors to Indian country. Usually it's an afterthought or an additional role that a company does, in serving Indian country, like the banks and legal and accounting. They usually are serving a broader audience, and then they have an Indian country or tribal space or office that they have a team that devotes time to tribes. But this was really devoting 100% of our time to Indian country. And for 13 years, we've devoted all of our time to Indian country. And I'm proud, now that we've grown. We have two offices, one in Phoenix is the main office, and one in Southern California in Irvine, being able to serve Indian country and to continue to make a difference every day with what we do. But about half of our team are tribal professionals, and the others all have experience in Indian country. So we have really built a unique advisory firm, in the sense that we serve only Indian country, and unique in the sense that we really devote all of our time to trying to make a difference every day in Indian country with the tribes that are our clients. And I think that perspective has really helped us to have a strong team, because everybody's unified in that vision of making a difference. And so all of our team members know that, it isn't all about making money. It's about making a difference. And through that, we're able to make a living and be able to leave every day knowing that, we are committed to something that's important and bigger than ourselves. But the spirit of entrepreneurship, for me, really, I've always appreciated it, and I've always respected it, as I said, because of my father and his, efforts. And I also saw the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, and I've experienced them for the last 13 years. It's definitely a roller coaster. And so that's one thing that I would make as a statement to any entrepreneur, is just be aware that it is a roller coaster. You're going to have really good times, and you're going to have times when you really have to struggle and find yourself and find balance with, creating work and opportunities. And you always have to be, I guess, assertive in the sense that things don't just come to you. I think after 13 years, we've become relatively known throughout Indian country. But as you become known, then you become unknown, because there are new people in leadership positions, and they don't know, what the historical leadership has done. So that's it, just that up and down.
Well, and that's something that, if you could speak a little bit more about that, 13, like you just said, 13 years later, and kind of in hindsight, what are some of the biggest learning lessons that you have experienced in running your business?
Thank you for asking that. I think the most important thing is make sure that you get the right, when you're hiring, don't just seek out employees, seek out the employees that are going to fit what you want to achieve, and that have that shared vision of making a difference, especially in our field, because that will be dependent on how much commitment they give to not only the growth of the organization, but to doing a great job and being committed to doing excellent work and doing something for a greater cause. And so regardless to the business that you're in, it has to be something that someone can come to work and be passionate about. The other, I think, again, to that roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship is, just because you have a great business plan doesn't mean that you're going to be able to go out and execute it immediately. You have to phase and really pace the growth of your organization. And you also have to take the time just to work on the business. And I know, especially in the advisory world or consulting world, it's hard to do the continued growing of the business while you're trying to create business opportunities and get clients. And so, that idea of, you're too busy doing the work to work on the business is pretty, time tested. And it's true, because you do have to balance between, making the commitment to the organization and preserving and protecting the identity of the brand and the marketing and the administrative oversight and assuring that, you're running a fiscally sound business. And a lot of business owners initially don't know that. They don't have that insight. I was fortunate that I got a business degree in university and studied small business management. So I at least had the insight to recognize that. I didn't necessarily do all of the initiatives while I was the chairman because it was a mature system. But as a startup, you have to put a lot of energy into really packaging your marketing, coming up with your service offerings or your product offerings, and making sure that they're of the highest quality that you would want to see. And then once you've gotten, let's say, 4 or 5 years into it, you've been able to see how the business turns from a seasonal point of view. And there are seasons to everything. We all know that, especially, if you live a traditional way and understand that there's seasons to business as well, and seasons to, times of productivity. And so we've recognized that over the years, really tried to treat our business from a tribal mindset and treat it in that seasonal approach, to how we do business, when we market, when we work on organizational growth, when we focus on, project work so that we can make it balanced. And it really does have to be, it's a grind when you have your own business, because you have to be prepared for, especially in serving Indian country, you have to be prepared for travel. I think I'm on the road 9 months out of the year and have been for the last 13 years for certain. And then while I was chairman, probably, maybe another 5 years of really heavy travel. And so you just, it depends on your service niche and what you're trying to accomplish. But, really just, it really does get me inspired. The body, takes its toll at the end of the year. You've got to relax and regroup for another year and another season of doing it. But it's that seasonality, knowing the ups and downs, being able to trust yourself and your staff and people that, if there are low times, that you're going to continue to push until you get stabilized again and
right.
Financially but you just have to be prepared for that. And, we've, over 13 years, we've seen a lot of the ups and downs. And so we've, as an organization, we've tried to stabilize by putting reserves in place and making sure that we can protect our staff with that, and making sure that we're, properly marketing and consistently marketing and
right.
utilizing technology as the tool that you all brought up earlier. And
absolutely. Well, in jumping back to your tenure as chairman, what did you see the biggest external obstacles to tribal economic development?
Ignorance about what a tribe is, what sovereignty is, and at all levels. I think one of the most important things I learned is that our job as leaders, as people, is that we have to constantly educate the non-Indian communities, because they don't teach that in school. They don't teach you what sovereignty is. They don't teach you what, a lot of people, it's unique. It's really crazy. But, even in the city of Phoenix, I get asked, where are the tribes at? I'm like, are you kidding me? This whole state is nothing but tribal land, and you don't know if there are any tribes here. But it's just amazing, the ignorance level. And I don't think it's in a negative aspect. I just think that there's no reason for people to learn about it unless they're interested in it. And so, as it is with everything. And so, for those of us that are native, that have, committed to our communities and are committed to Indian country, we take time to learn about the aspects of sovereignty, how to protect it, how to strengthen it, how to utilize it, how to leverage it. But I think sovereignty is one. I think the other outside challenge is the lack of organizational stability in some of the business arms of tribes. That's I think changing. The landscape's changed over the last 20 years with gaming and what it's been able to create. A lot of tribes are really well-oiled machines in their business arms, but still that, to bring a non-Indian business onto tribal land, there has to be the proper laws and codes in place from a tribal perspective, the taxing elements, and all of those things that the tribe needs to have control over as a landlord or as a land leaseor. And I think there's still some hesitancy from businesses to move on to tribal lands. That's not everywhere, but for sure in some cases it is that we've seen. So really getting that out, educating the people about what the tribe is hoping to achieve by bringing businesses on their lands is really valuable. And again, back as my term as chairman, that was one of the challenges that we had in bringing businesses onto our lands. Is really, we needed to build a whole body of laws and a corporate code and land use code so that we were, seen as a legitimate business place to do business on. So legitimizing the business opportunities.
And true indeed, the reality that any business, and speaking again to entrepreneurship, that starts out to provide a product or a service, that doesn't mean that those people that are starting that business or have that product or that service are accounting experts or all have legal degrees. So you outsource the things that you don't have proficiency in. And it oftentimes seems that tribes get challenged on their legitimacy if they're literally not doing every aspect of the business. The challenges to the economic arms of the tribes and the legitimacy that gets questioned sometimes is just, it is truly based in ignorance. And I think that, you try to find a word that is a better word to use, but it's truly ignorant. I mean, it's just literally people do not know any better. Shifting gears a little bit to infrastructure, it often comes up as one of the biggest roadblocks to meaningful long-term economic and community growth on reservations across this country.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on and your opinion about what we can do to overcome those challenges? Because funding is always an issue. We talk about, investment in our communities, yet if you don't have, good roads, if you don't have broadband capabilities, if you don't have the proper school systems, if you don't have jobs, if you don't have the resources that folks from the outside would look at investing in bringing opportunity to the community, it sometimes seems almost like it could maybe never happen. And what kind of intentionality do you think Indian country has to pay to infrastructure?
I think it's the number one gap beyond what was just described, the governance infrastructure, is the actual physical infrastructure. We've been honored, as I said, to serve many tribes, and that's usually the number one challenge. Is they want to get business, but they don't have the infrastructure. They have the land, they don't have the infrastructure. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about, your basic sewage, water, electric, Wi-Fi, things that are basic necessities in the modern world. And so when you think about the lack of funding out there, there's a couple of gaps. One is infrastructure isn't appealing to the community either. It's not sexy, so to speak. I remember putting infrastructure in for a housing development in my community, and my people were angry that we were spending so much money on, digging in the ground, and nothing was. It's what you see that becomes impressive. You fast forward 13 years, and there's an entire community there now. And so that's, you have to find that balance and educate your own communities, for tribal leaders, that there is an importance that the tribe can contribute some resources to infrastructure. And to your point that you made, there's learning how to leverage, the different funding sources that are out there, but recognizing it isn't free. It is infrastructure. There's never going to be a grant that covers an entire infrastructure build out. There's never going to be an increase in the funding from the federal government to, build out your entire infrastructure. But there are loans and there are guaranteed funds that tribes can borrow, and in many cases, tribes have great relationships with their banks and do long-term lending to pay it back over a longer period of time, as opposed to a short-term loan. And so that becomes very important, recognizing what funding's out there, recognizing how to leverage a bond fund as opposed to, for community development. But it's a critical path to, for sure, physical business. You had mentioned something earlier, though, that really struck me, because it is another piece that's important, and that's building a infrastructure to support small business ownership and entrepreneurship on the reservation. And a lot of tribes, they don't have a corporation code, so you can't incorporate on the tribe, and in some cases they don't necessarily try to encourage business. Some tribes these days are building incubators, and we've been fortunate to work with several tribes and help them build out an incubator model to serve their entrepreneur and businesses. And so, that's to your point, that's where they provide the services like accounting and legal and may provide space support and micro lending to small business owners, tribal members. And so I think that there is a greater opportunity, like in America, where if the tribes were more supportive of their members, it'd take a lot of pressure off of the tribal government needing to be the job provider for everybody as well.
And isn't that interesting how much that conflicts with, tradition and with our being able to go out and provide for our own families and doing it so well that we could additionally provide for the rest of the community, that in many ways today it seems like everyone's dependent upon those people that sit on council. And we've kind of turned the table to where everybody becomes dependent versus independent. And it creates a whole environment of dependency, codependency. And this could be a whole podcast in and of itself, that conversation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But one of the components about infrastructure, and that Carmen and I often talk about, and I think one of the questions that she has right now really gets into even breaking that whole infrastructure development conversation down into something that maybe isn't often done as much as maybe it should be.
Absolutely. My question to you was, how vital is master planning to the infrastructure conversation?
Now, master planning is very valuable in that if you can define where you want your businesses and you can leverage a loan for business development and put in extra piping and extra sewage lines and extra cable and do all of that in a bigger plot than you're planning for, it's really valuable to sequencing and phasing the growth. So you don't have to do it all at once, but if you think about it in advance, you can lay it out in advance. And so that becomes very valuable from a generational point of view, from a growth point of view. One tribal leadership team may not be able to accomplish it, but, as I said, fast forward a decade and it can get done because of the plan. And, that's what we did at home while I was chairman. We did the planning and put the infrastructure in. None of that is appealing and to the membership because it's not putting up the buildings. But you go there now and, they have business there. They have tribal buildings there. They have houses there. And so it's really beneficial for leadership planning. Also, when new leaders come into office, they don't automatically know, what they're going to accomplish. They make promises because you have to, in some cases, to get elected. But, once you get in there, if someone's left you something that makes sense and seems reasonable to accomplish and halfway done, and you get to be the one that finishes it, that's a very gratifying to not only the previous leadership in the community, but to the new leaders as they come in. They have something they can finish and work on. And so I think from a tribal perspective, looking through the long lens, it's valuable. Planning it in every case is valuable because it provides a toolkit or a tool to utilize, not necessarily, completely or wholly, but it provides a tool to utilize for new leaders as they come in, and also to keep the system unified. But master planning, especially land use and infrastructure, as well as, the growth of the government and services, very valuable.
Our experience in this country has been much different than any other community, and it is unique. And, sometimes we have been forced for so many decades to overcome, to survive, that many of the things that we end up doing once we're not in that, and not to say that many tribes aren't dealing with, day-to-day funding issues, and that we're not dealing with, just literally putting one fire out, and another one pops up, or there's 10 that pop up.
Yeah.
And there's always something going, and it just seems like you can never kind of get ahead of the curve. And it's this, decades long approach survival approach to dealing with things. And when you're surviving things, it's very hard to be intentional. It's very hard to sit back and say, well, what do we want to do versus what do we have to do? And I think that it really speaks to sometimes when you have conversations with folks and you get into, well, how come that housing development ended up there and it was just built and then, 5 years later it's challenged, it's struggling. It has, but it wasn't built around any infrastructure to support it. No schools were put around it. No opportunities for employment were put around it. It literally had no real intentionality, but we had money to build it, so we built it. And I think that that's one of the big turning points that we in across Indian country have to come to is why are we doing it? But deeper than that, is it the best thing to do in that location on our land, and is it most meaningful? And it kind of leads me into my next question, because you can't really get into the economic development conversation very far in Indian country before it becomes socioeconomic. And you've referenced this many times about you're doing things, but because the community doesn't get it, oftentimes you then become challenged with the opinions and the feedback from the community and why are you doing this and how come you're doing it. And given that, we talk a lot about growing and advancing economic development in Indian country, but given that unique position and the relationship tribes have as sovereign nations and the trust relationship tribes have with the United States government, we're positioned differently than other people of color and other diversity communities in this country. So given that, what do you see as the unique challenges and conversely the opportunities that tribes have in creating long-term economic, self-sufficient, and sustainable growth in our communities? And I know that's a really loaded question, and that probably could be a podcast in all of itself. So we'll use the balance of our time.
That's been my lifetime's work, Gary. That's been my lifetime's work.
and I don't know, that you could not answer that question without it spiderwebbing out and leading to 50 million other things. But, I just want to know your thoughts, and I think the listeners would want to hear, what is the way forward and what are the challenges, but also what are the opportunities, and how do we own those things, and how do we know our own worth and value and proceed forward?
I think that's a really great question. It is socioeconomic, and that workforce development is the number one need in most tribal systems, most tribal communities, most tribal reservation communities. And one of the challenges that goes along with that is there's a lack of housing on tribal lands for tribal members to come home. And in many cases, the homes were built by HUD low income housing. And so you have to qualify for those homes. So workforce development and housing are interrelated, and they're both the number one gaps in a majority of the tribes around the country. And so there's an interrelationship there that needs to be viewed. Housing needs to be viewed as an economic development tool. You bring in, your brightest and best membership, the ones that you paid. In most cases, tribes are paying for their people's education. Those that have gone out and gotten the business degrees and the law degrees and the healthcare degrees and the administrative degrees to be able to come back and live in a home that they feel proud of being in, and be able to live and work in the community is critical path to the future. So that's number one. That's the here and now number one. The second one is education and training for the next generation. When I say education and training, I know that everybody's not, going to go to college. It's not the call for everyone, and that's okay. But there are needs in every tribal community right now that could be valuable, where tribal members could be entrepreneurs, or they could work for the tribe. Example: plumbers, electricians. I'm coming from Phoenix, 110 degrees, HVAC, those things are critical path jobs that are needed in every tribal community. And so there's a role for those folks to become technically trained. IT is the number one is one of those things that every tribe needs and uses, but we don't have a lot of expertise in it. So we're reliant on IT experts. And in some cases, we're too reliant on them, and they control as someone said, the keys to the house. And so, that IT infrastructure is so important to bring knowledge and gain knowledge and how it's used, how it's being used, how to limit its uses to make sure that the tribe is protected, its information is safe and protected. And, from an, again, socioeconomic growth path, this is an important time to utilize and leverage technology to embrace culture. Because the generations coming up, the young adults today and younger, those native techno people that have been, born into technology, that's how they communicate. Old school folks like me that are still kind of traditional are thinking, we like to live in the real world, but, that is their real world. The technology is part of their real lifestyle and life imagery and life essence. And so I think to embrace culture going forward, tribes are going to have to use technology and be able to integrate it so that the young people will embrace culture, our tribal culture. And so that's another piece that comes from a socioeconomic perspective. And then finally, sovereignty is so powerful of a tool. It's our God-given right as Indian people to be sovereigns in our tribes and our nations. But as importantly, it's a legal right. And tribes need to leverage that sovereignty to all of its advantages and opportunities. And when I say that, I mean everything. And I've been honored to be out in Indian country, and I've seen some amazing ways, some tribes creating their own passports, some tribes creating their own, leveraging the tax advantages, for being having the ability to be a taxing agent like any other state and county, and tribes, leveraging their sovereignty and the expression of their sovereignty to be a really strong influence in the regions that they live in and are part of outside of the tribe. That government to government discussion is very important from a federal level, but I think as importantly these days at the state level. Traditionally we were always, proud not to have to deal with all the other entities, just go directly to the federal government. But in the modern era, things are controlled in the regional level. And so when you go to the federal government, when I was chairman, I go to speak to the senators at the time, Senator McCain, and he would say, what does the local community think about it? Because he was also serving that greater public. And so I learned that it became very important to communicate with the local communities about what we were doing, not to ask their permission, but to inform them so they knew if we were going to create new jobs or we needed, more educational support in the public schools or, for our people and those kinds of things. So I think really for tribal leaders and I think tribal citizens, just understanding what sovereignty is. It doesn't give you the right to do everything, but there are a lot of freedoms that we are given and inherent in a tribal sovereign status on tribal lands, and I think that becomes an important tool because it can be used off reservation as well. And in a federal corporation, Section 17, where the tribe's flag can fly off reservation as well, and they can leverage sovereignty off reservation. So I think that understanding and knowledge of the legal framework of sovereignty as it's expressed in the modern world, being able to push it to the limit, to make them tell you no, not think they're going to say no and don't do it. Because you can't really express sovereignty without doing it. So that's always my advice to leaders is, you are sovereign, express your sovereignty, not to break laws, but, you don't know what, sometimes you think there's going to be stopped and it isn't. So
yes,
I think that's very valuable tool. So, those are the core of the socioeconomic.
Well, thank you.
And, always the challenge is, drugs and alcohol, the challenge in every community,
right,
whether it's tribal or not. And that needs to be addressed head on. You can't walk around it.
Absolutely.
And when I say that, some people need to be punished for what they're doing. But we all need to recognize that the people live there and they're not going anywhere. And so what kind of support can they receive when they get home or get out from a treatment center and that? Because in most cases, the community members go right back to the same thing they were doing before they left. And so it just really is a socioeconomic thing that I think is very important that tribes recognize it. And I don't want to say it can be dealt with by just putting money towards it, but it does really help to have trained professionals that know how to help.
And if you don't have
support folks,
rehabilitation centers aren't free, and it takes money. Yep. And when people get into that conversation in the community about, oh, we're just all about money, or we're just trying to make money. Well, it takes money to do those kinds of things, and oftentimes there isn't federal funding for those kinds of things, or
that's correct.
If there are opportunities for federal funding, it's not substantial enough to really, at the end of the day, doing anything more than putting a Band-Aid on it.
Right. So it's using the money as a tool and to empower ourselves.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. And there's so many amazing points and so many vital points. I truly hope that our listeners were absorbing all of those things, because truly, indeed, with sovereignty, if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. And more so now than ever, it's being challenged, left, right, and front and center. And, for future generations, I'm sure it'll continue to be that way. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being on this episode of the Native Business Podcast. And, one of the things that when we set this up, we wanted it to be about entrepreneurship. Carmen and I are entrepreneurs ourselves. We want it to be a testament to what we're out here advocating and preaching for other folks to become. And also it gives us the freedom to say, hey, you know what? We don't have to worry about compliance with this or compliance with that. This is about our people doing better. Yes. So we don't have to worry about if Jamie Fullmer does a commercial for Bluestone Strategy. We absolutely intentionally are going to say, Jamie Fullmer, you should do a commercial for Bluestone Strategy, because it's about all of us making money and being able to support our families, being able to support ourselves, and being independent to achieve our dreams, our goals, and do what it is the Creator put us here on this earth to be able to hunt. Not say you can only hunt for rabbits, or you can only hunt for deer, or you can't hunt over in those woods. Hey man, if you feel like you can go out there and get it done, go get it done. And so with that, tell people where they can get a hold of you, and this is your time for that.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Well, it was a privilege to be able to speak with you both today. Well, Bluestone Strategy Group is, our head office is located in Phoenix, Arizona, but you can reach us best by just going to our website, which is www.bluestonestrategy.com, and go to our info page and just put a request to follow up, and we'll follow up with you directly. And also provide some background on the company, our history, our work in Indian country, the services that we provide. And, I'm privileged to be able to serve Indian country. It was my calling. I felt it from a very early age, and it's never gone away. I was honored to serve my own community, and to be able to serve, the broader Indian country community has been just as valuable of an experience for me as a human being. And I get to earn a living doing it, and so that's even better. It's icing on the cake. And I told everybody, if I could do it for free, I would. But we have to earn a living in the modern world. It's about money.
Absolutely.
It takes it to make it. And, it's about it not defining you, but you defining it, and you earn the money. Correct. The money doesn't make you. So
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Just our closing question: what does your Native business mean to you?
My Native business means to me, I get to wake up every day and test my own wits, test my own capabilities, challenge myself, but I'm also honored to have a team of people that all see the greater cause that we're striving to achieve. And, we have tribal leaders as part of our team, and we have tribal professionals as part of our team. We have non-Indian professionals that understand and respect Indian country. So to be able to be a part of their lives in that way, to help them to achieve their own professional and personal goals is as important to me as the business. But I think, being a Native, being able to be a role model, I guess, in some cases, and then also to be able to serve Indian country and be a Native business, that it can be done, that you can. It's a challenge to serve Indian country. It's definitely not easy, but it's worth it in the sense that you really are helping, tribes to preserve and protect their communities and for the future. And there's something very important to that as a Native person, to be able to be part of that, the support and to be a supporting cast in that effort. And I think finally, as just a Apache, as a being proud to be an Apache and being proud of being able to serve other Indian people, I think it's just it's a great honor. And as I said, it's been a calling my entire life. So I feel like I've been living out the dream, I guess.
Mr. Jamie Fullmer, thank you.
Thank you
for joining us today on the Native Business Podcast. We appreciate you. We thank you for all the great things that you're doing in your work with Bluestone Strategy. We want to thank all of our listeners. If you want to reach out to us, podcast at nativebusinessmag.com is where you can reach us. And you can also feel free to give us a review on whatever podcast platform that you are listening to this on. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week.